everybody in the base medrash is learning. And so we did, I tried to do what I can with regards to Maseches Beitza. I'm sure a person can learn the way we've been learning on every daf if they have the koyach and if the person has the mind. But with the Aniyas Taiti, in accordance with the Maharsha and the Ben Ish Chai, they seem to feel that there was really no more Aggadah left in Maseches Beitza. So I asked the Rav if he wanted us to switch to a new Masechta, or if I was going to be able to sneak in kind of a desire that I've had for a while, which is to shift not away from learning Gemara, but away from Aggadah to a different way of learning Gemara, which is going to be Sugyos and Lamdas, meaning different svaros, whether it's a Chazal, it doesn't have to be fancy from a late Achron. It could be a Sugya and Chazal. Chazal have a lot of Lamdas of their own. And to look at the Sugya, not to invest in the Sugyos and Lamdas, but to abstract the Klal in Lamdas and apply it b'derech Penimius and b'derech Avodah. Meaning to take a klal, for example, of kol ha'omed lizrok kazaruk dami, that everything that stands at the ready to be thrown in the future is seen as if it has already been thrown. And to take that concept and to understand what it means in Penimius, how that can be found in the Arizal, in the Rashbi, wherever we look, and most importantly, to apply it b'derech HaChasidus in terms of Avodas HaNefesh, what a klal like that can mean. And, over time I've developed a number of klalim, kol ha'ra'i lebila ein bila ma'keves boi, koyach and poel. Now obviously there were the tzaddikim who began this mahalach were really, the Rogachover Goy and the Grach, the Lamdanim, who really were makabel their mahalach from the Torah, the Baal Shem Tov as well, as Rav Itchemeyer points out. But there's going to be a lot of sugyos that we can look at to try and see how the klalim in Lamdas also apply to klalim in Pnimius, and that if you're learning a Rav Chaim, then you can most certainly be learning the Arizal as well, because the abstractive thought of Rav Chaim Brisker, which is mamish Torah Misinai, then the Torah of the Arizal is also about the Torah Misinai. Not that we need, chazakos on either one of them, but it's important to see the transferability from one level of revealed Torah to the next level of concealed Torah. But before we go there, and Be'ezer Hashem, we'll figure out, maybe I'll send out Makoros beforehand, but there's just one Aggadah that I want to look at just as kind of a buffer zone between the Aggadahs that we've been looking at in Maseches Beitza and the transition into the Aggadah, so to speak, at the heart of Lamdas as well. And we're going to look in Maseches Shabbos. Now, this is a Gemara that I'm osek in right now. It's a Gemara that I've been giving shir on. I'm giving shirim on Yitzchak Avinu. In another series of shirim that I'm giving Baruch Hashem. So this is a Gemara that I've been thinking a lot about, that really gets to the core of Yitzchak Avinu and what Yitzchak Avinu is about. But instead of going through it in a systematic way like we're trying to do in the shirim, this will be more just kind of what we've been doing, trying to learn through the words of Chazal themselves and see exactly what they're saying in this context. Now, the Gemara that we're going to be looking at is on Daf Peitas Amud Beis in Maseches Shabbos. Now, just in line with what we've been discussing, and this is an akudah that I've said before, but the daf, right? We know the omni significance of Torah Sheba'al Peh means that every aspect of the way that Torah Sheba'al Peh is formulated represents an essential process, meaning it's not by chance how things were printed, the type of paper that they were printed on, the towns that they were printed in, most certainly the pages that things are printed on, the script, the text, the fonts in which things are written. These are, gufei halachos in terms of the transmission of Torah Sheba'al Peh throughout the generations. Rabbi Nosson Mimarov, Zchus Yagen Aleinu, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, sees the invention of the printing press as a singularly unique moment in the history of Torah being disclosed in this world. So we can really study the textual history of how things come into being. But certainly what we've been saying on the daf that we look at, we can find the remez to what we're discussing. So on Daf Peitas Amud Beis in Maseches Shabbos. So Maseches Shabbos, Shabbos represents Me'ein Olam Haba. Shabbos represents the apex, the culmination of a person's process through this world. If life, like we know, the Ramchal says the name of Chazal, is like a prozor, that's going to be basically the 6 days of the week where we're working, investing, attempting to build, prepare, earn. And then a person comes to Shabbos, which is the opposite of that. Shabbos is, on the one hand, it's a bracha, right, which is a continuation of everything that I've gained throughout the 6 days. But on the other hand, Shabbos is kadosh in the sense that it's separate and apart, right? There's kedusha and bracha inherent within Shabbos. The Maharal, Zchus Yagen Aleinu, discusses the distinction between these two elements of Shabbos at length in the 40th chapter of Tiferes Yisrael. But suffice it to say that Shabbos represents the culmination of activity. It represents the world of Olam Haba, of the world to come, so to speak. Now, Chazal tell us when it comes to Olam Haba, which is associated with Bina, which is associated with a place where we fully understand everything, or to return back into that maternal matrix where things are comfortable and we're carried and we're supported outside of our own efforts. And so Shabbos represents the Shar Hanun. It represents the Giloi, the highest Giloi of Olam Haba, perfection or something that a person has grasped. What does it mean when a person has grasped something? It means they're a tzaddik, right? To be a tzaddik is to be a davar shalim. Now, like we've spoken about so much, there's no shleimus, right? But to be a davar shalim is to accept the fact that I'm not shalim and to find shleimus within that. As we've said in the past, from Rav Meir Shlita, in the name of the Bali Tosfos, that the reason we have and need so many tzaddikim in this world and in this epoch is because the klipa, or the avodah zarah that we're fighting against, is an avodah zarah that came and took a Jew and said a Jew can be perfect. It can be a perfected creature, as we know from other religions. And therefore the tzaddikim come over and over and over and over again to remind us that nothing and nobody can be perfect other than God. God forbid. So the inyan of Shabbos is an inyan of tzaddik, right? It's an inyan of being makusher to that place within each and every one of ourselves, of amich kulam tzaddikim, right? That each and every person in Klal Yisrael is a tzaddik. Now there's three gradations of tzaddik, right? There's the ikr, which is tzaddiko shel olam, which is Hashem. Hashem is the tzaddiko shel olam. Then there's the tzaddik yisod olam. Then there's the tzaddik in the world. And then there's the amich kulam tzaddikim. And be'emes, one of the roles of the tzaddikim is that they come and they're mishadeach, they're the shadchanim between the chelik of a tzaddik within us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's the true tzaddik. As Rabbi Nachman said, that he's just a shadchin, and really all a tzaddik is, always and forever, is to be a Bal Tefillah. Bal Tefillah is yoytze the klal. They know more than the klal, they have more power than the klal, they're holier, they take more upon themselves than the klal. But sof davar kol nishma, they're nothing without the klal. And that the shliach tzibor is makasher, the tzaddik within us, with tzaddiko shel olam, which is the Rabban Shalom. Shabbos is an inyan of being a tzaddik. The tzaddi of Shabbos, tzaddi represents tzaddik, right? Tzaddik ant, the Zohar Kadosh says, that the letter tzaddi, even as we read the aleph beis, right, we typically say tzaddi kuf, and therefore because of the way that we linguistically express the non-breakage between those two letters, it very often sounds like tzaddik, right? Tzaddik kuf. And that the letter tzadi is memela inherently connected with the concept of tzaddik, as seen explicitly in the Zohar HaKadosh. And so the tzaddik, daf tzaddik in Masechah Shabbos, is really like being a tzaddik on Shabbos, which is a time of being a tzaddik. It's like having truly grasped, the concept of being a tzaddik. Pei tes amid beis is like just before really getting it, just before really mamish being a tzaddik. And it's the representation that, meaning no matter how much we try to be that full experience of the tzaddik, part of the goal, or part of the experience, especially for those of us who are not tzaddikim, and that we're just trying to be, possible people, beinanim, is that to realize that I'm trying to be a tzaddik, but I can't quite be a tzaddik, and I'm living in that place of trying to be a tzaddik. I know I took a swear that I'm going to be a tzaddik. There's some unconscious force driving me to be a tzaddik. I'm at the peites, amid beis, but I still can't reach that place of tzaddik. Peites is also, if we look at it, if you flip the letters around, it's taf. Taf is totafos. It's the Lashon Afriki, which Chazal tell us that the ritzuos from the tefillin are referred to as toitafos, but it's not a Hebrew language. It's Lashon Afriki. But what Chazal learned from there, and what Rabbi Nachman points out from that place, is that the true koyach of kedusha, especially tefillin, which is a siman for dveikus, is the ability to elevate even those fallen languages, the totafot, which have nothing to do with kedusha, and bring them into kedusha. They're not quite kedusha, but they can still access kedusha, and that's going to be very similar to what we're looking at on daf pei tes amid beis, which is the language of taf, which is the same osios, to teach us what it means to not quite be at the point of being a tzaddik, but also being okay with that. Yeah.
Just because you hit on it, is there anything specific about Lashon Afriki, that Lashon?
Avada, there's something specific, but not that meaning it's nichlal. Look, it's different than Lashon Targum, right? Lashon Targum we can talk a lot about, but Lashon Afriki I don't have anything to say, but Avada, something in terms of the tefillin, and absolutely. And so, what's the kesher? What's the kesher of this concept of almost being the tzaddik, but not quite being the tzaddik, but really specifically in recognizing that our avoda is not necessarily to be a tzaddik, but to live in the space of not quite being a tzaddik, that we uncover the potential of truly being the yid that we need to be. What's the hiskashers to this daf? We're going to see that Yitzchak Avinu represents this very nature. Because on the one hand, Yitzchak Avinu is very different than Avram and Yaakov in the sense that he was passive in relationship to their activity. He was not an activist. Avram Avinu was most certainly an activist. Yaakov Avinu desired to have shalva, but kufsa alav rugza di Yosef, that was not in Yaakov's experience. It was not set up for him. But Yitzchak Avinu, we really know next to nothing about. Yitzchak Avinu is silent. He's almost absent from the scene. His experiences, which are so intense, don't even get associated with him. When we think about Akedas Yitzchak, we tend to think about the power of Avram Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu is rarely, if ever, mentioned in the Torah without being described as somebody's son, father, or husband, I believe, implying the fact that Yitzchak Avinu seems to almost disappear from the scene. But at the same point, what we're going to see in this Gemara is that very silence of Yitzchak Avinu, that very absence that we associate with Yitzchak and everything that he represents, that in truth, counterintuitively, because the whole possibility of counterintuitivity, what's the word? The counterintuitive, right? It's my father here, so I have to be careful. Right, the counterintuitive gesture, the counterintuitive gesture within the Jewish spirit is rooted in the very essence of Yitzchak Avinu. The lashon of counterintuitive moments in Chazal is referred to as adarabba ibcha mistabra. Adarabba ibcha mistabra. No, the opposite is true. It's the opposite of what you thought. Now, my Rebbe Rav Weinberger pointed out in the name of Tzaddikim that adarabba is adarba. Right, that adarabba is adarba. It means that adar is coming, and we have to get into the mindset of v'nahapachu. But Yitzchak Avinu is the adarabba ibcha mistabra. Yitzchak Avinu's entire essence is the transformation of what we thought we knew about anything, and that's also very much associated with the lashon of totafos. How could it be that something so deep and connective as tefillin is going to be associated with a foreign language, and it's going to be the fact that we can't quite be the tzaddik yet. Okay, so let's look at the Gemara. Sorry. Okay, Amar of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan. So Amar of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amar of Yonasan. My dichsiv, what does it mean when the pasuk says, Ki ata avinu, for you are our father, Ki Avram lo yadanu v'Yisrael lo yakirenu, ata Hashem avinu go'aleinu me'olam shimcha. What does the pasuk mean when it says that Bnei Yisrael are going to announce, you are our father? Why are you our father? Because Avraham no longer knows us. Yisrael no longer recognizes us. You, Hashem, our father, our redeemer, forever your name will be expressed in glory. What does this Ki ata avinu mean? La'asid lavo, in the future, Yoimer lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'Avram. So when the future comes, right, when it's time to bring Geula, when it's time to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu, and again, Shabbos is La'asid lavo, right? Daf Pei Tes is that precipice right before the Ois Tzadi, which is that preparation for La'asid lavo. So La'asid lavo, in the emergence of the future, when it's time to transition from this stage to the next, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to come to Avram Avinu. And he's going to say, Banecha chatuli, your children have transgressed against me. Almost coming to Avram for with a claim, saying, "Come, stand up for your children. They've really messed up." Amar lefanav Rabbeinu Shalom yimchu al kedusha shemecha. So what Avram Avinu is going to say at that point is, erase them for the sake of your name. Now, on the one hand, the simple pshat is that there's a certain, absence of empathy, so to speak, on behalf of Avram Avinu, but like we saw in Beitzah, that's an impossibility. Yaakov is Rachamim, Avram is Rachamim. So here, the way that Tzaddikim described this Gemara is that the reason that Avram Avinu didn't want to engage with kind of giving reasons for the Jewish people to be redeemed on their own right is because Avram Avinu knew the secret that Hashem, what are you talking about? Like, your name is so tremendously great that it can get rid of and maintain all of these discrepancies, so just reveal your name in its fullest and there's not going to be any chatayim left. What do you need tshuva for? What do you need this concept of transforming darkness into light for? Just reveal light completely. So that's why Avram Avinu says, get rid of them for the sake of the holiness of your name. Reveal the true power of your name.
Or you get rid of the sins?
Get rid of all inequity. Get rid of the whole concept of Bechira to begin with. Get rid of the whole concept of Schar v'oinish, of Eitz Hadas Tevera. What?
Lashon is Yimsu, Lashon Misa.
Lashon is Yimchu, al Kedusha Shemecha. Yimchu, right? Mechika. Right, Yimsu we could also deal with, because Chazal tell us, the Gra says at Mefurish, that death is not Misa as much as Misa is any degradation from the level that one stood by a moment before, and you descend a little bit downwards, that's considered Misa. So all of the languages that we find when it discusses the need for Misa can also be seen, specifically through the teachings of the Gra, as really being completed by just any slight descent. But Yimchaku here is a precise language, because erasing, the act of erasing is really a way of, right, the way we know Mechika in the Torah is really what we refer to as Chakika, engraving. It's erasing the stone for the sake of engraving it and revealing something.
So Yimchu is going on the Averos.
Yimchu is going on the Averos, and more importantly, the entire concept of Avera. Meaning Avram is saying, Rebbeinu Shalom, you're asking for a reason for redemption. Just you know this is all a game. We know it's a game at this point. You know this is a game. Just reveal the Kedusha of your name. What do you need me to get involved in being a lawyer for the Jewish people? You know their inherent holiness. I know their inherent holiness. We all know that the sins and the transgressions are kikol ha'am b'shgaga. None of it is essential. None of it is real, as all of the tzaddikim say. So, okay, higiyazman she'ta'ir ta'or al kol ha'olam, right? Reveal your name, v'zehu. So Avram Avinu is not so much saying, oh, get rid of Klal Yisrael. God forbid. Right? They would never allow Moshe Rabbeinu to get away with such a thought. What Avram Avinu is saying is, what do you need us for right now? What do you need the Jewish people to get in line for? Reveal yourself. That's how I understand this Gemara, as opposed to seeing some sort of disinterest on behalf of Avram. Can't be. A person can't think that Avram was disinterested in the redemption of his children. So it has to be that Avram Avinu was saying there's other ways to do this. Go from a Yichud Ilah perspective. Reveal Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that there's no such thing as separation whatsoever. And then you don't have to learn and try and find reasons to validate separation. Just get rid of the whole concept of separation to begin with.
But Yimchuku is Lashon of negation, totally. So it was Ki'ilu never there, as opposed to Yamisu, where it was there, and now just remove it for us so that we can go forward. And Yimchuku means Milachatchila. Ki'ilu was never there as a mitzvah.
Yeah, but I mean, what we're going to see in this Gemara is really that it's one thing to erase it completely. That's why Hashem's not going to follow Avram's advice. It's one thing to erase it completely. It's another thing to force them to move through the difficulty itself and bring it up to Kedusha. That's it. Right, Yimchuku, Avram Avinu is saying, like, what do I need to hold on to the Gevuros for? It's time for Geula. Let go of the Gevuros. Okay. Amar Emalei Yaakov. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, maybe we'll go to Yaakov. Dahavelei tsar gidol banim. Maybe Yaakov will have an answer. Why? Because he had tsar gidol banim. Meaning, maybe Yaakov Avinu will understand the value of the tsar in life, which is the world of Yitzchak, in order to understand why I need the salvation and redemption to come from the Jewish people themselves, and not simply by way of a light that is revealed from above to below. Because the Iker Giloi, the Iker Yegiya, the essential effort that we put in this world, is the effort to come through the darkness into the light afterwards. And so the cheshbon is, okay, Avram said, okay, just reveal Or Ein Sof, right? So maybe Yaakov will have a different answer. Why? What's the star that Yaakov will have a different answer? Because he experienced it. Yaakov knows the value of it. Yaakov understands the value of that Sar Gidol Banim. So maybe he'll understand why he has to engage. You know, the Chazal say that Bikesh Yaakov Leishev B'Shalva. Yaakov desired to live in Shalva. Miad Kufza Alav Rugz Yosef. So what I've thought for some time now is that Pashat Pshat is Avad, Yaakov wanted Shalva, and in order to show Yaakov that he can't have Shalva, Kufza Alav Rugz Yosef. The anger, the rage of Yosef descended upon him. But a person can read it also as Rebbeinu Shalom giving Yaakov exactly what he desires. Bikesh Yaakov l'Shalva. Yaakov wanted to understand the secret of Shalva. What does it mean to sit calmly? Now, the secret of calmness can't be what everybody thinks calmness is. We typically assume calmness to be the absence of all discrepancy or issues, that calmness is where everything is clear. But in Yiddishkeit, calmness is the ability to see everything as being clear within the storm itself. So when Yaakov Avinu says, I want to learn how to sit b'shalva, Hashem says, okay, I'll put you to task. You want to learn how to sit b'shalva? Miyad, kufsa love rugzad Yosef. Here's rugzad Yosef. See how you fare in the face of this intense discrepancy, and that's how you're going to find the secret of shalva.
What's the
I'm sorry?
The continuum of that memory is the that you're going to get Olam Haba, you want to also Shabbat Olam Hazeh. So how do you
Meaning that the reason that Hashem says that He's not going to give Yaakov, right? Because Yaakov, we can say that Yaakov thought that Shalva is Olam Haba, that Olam Haba typically can be seen as the negation of Olam Hazeh, right? That Shalva is Olam Haba, and so Yaakov is requesting, at first glance, Olam Haba dika Shalva, a calmness and a menucha without any discrepancy. And what Hashem is saying is that really, be'emes, there's a menucha in Olam Hazeh that a person can also find that can't be found in Olam Haba because a person has to go through the struggles down here. So let's go weiter. Amr le Yaakov David le Tzar Gidol Banim. Perhaps Yaakov Avinu will understand why the redemption has to come by way of the limited creature, by way of the difficulty, by way of being human. Efshar debai rachme alayu. Perhaps at this point he's going to find compassion on them. Now I'm just looking right now, and this is something that I would say in Schus of Menachem Nachum. The ba'i, it's osios de, meaning the dalit is coming to refer to something, and ba'i is Roshei Tevos of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, the three lower worlds where there's difficulty. Because in the Arizal we have four worlds. We have Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Yaakov Avinu's entire avodah, Yaakov has Yud, Ayin, Kuf, Beis. He has the Bia within him, but he also has the Kuf, which is the Kedusha, because Yaakov is able to be the Kav that's Yored down into that place. So the question here is, because the whole Sug of Yitzchak is really revealing the laughter that comes from that place of separation, from that place of Olam Hazeh. And so perhaps Yaakov Avinu, who had Tsar Gidol Banim, he understands the role of Tsar in this world, and he also understands what the worlds of separation are. Perhaps he'll come in and ask for rachamim. Amar le, and Yaakov Avinu is going to say, Banecha chatu. I'm sorry, Rabbeinu Shalom is going to say, Banecha chatu, your children have transgressed. Amar lefanav, Rabbeinu Shalom yimchu al kedusha shemecha. Same thing. Reveal your name. Erase it by way of, not yimchu al kedusha shemecha, meaning erase it for the sake of the holiness of your name, but rather yimchu al kedusha shemecha, meaning the cheshbon is on kedusha shemecha. And so there's no cheshbon, right? It's a cheshbon ein sof. You can handle anything. You can hold it all, Ribbon Shalom. Shayimchu, get rid of all of it. Al shem kedusha shemecha, by way of the revelation of the kedusha of your name. Amar, at that point, the Ribbon Shalom is going to say, Loi b'sabi taimei v'loi b'dardek etza. The grandfather doesn't have a reason, and the grandson, the grandchild doesn't have an insight. So I'm sure we can spend a lot of time discussing reasons versus insight, but we'll go weiter. Amar lo li Yitzchak. Rabbanu Shalom comes and he speaks to Yitzchak. Banecha chatu. Your children have transgressed. Banechu chatu li. Your children have transgressed towards me. Amar lefanav. He says in front of him, Rabbanu Shalom, Master of the universe, Banai v'lo banecha. My children are not your children. You're being Mesiaches, Klal Yisrael, to me and not to yourself. He's calling HaKadosh Baruch Hu out. He's pointing his finger at HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying, wait a second. You're disowning them at this point. Ke'ilu, they're not your children as much as they're my children. Meaning to say, Ke'ilu, their transgressions and their failures have nothing to do with how you created them or how you set up the world. Like Moshe Rabbeinu says, that Rabbeinu Shalom, what do you expect from them? Like a child outside of a base zonos with a bag of money around their necks. Yitzchak Avinu was saying it in a different way. He's saying, Rabbeinu Shalom, my children, Keilu, this is responsible in their human element. They're your children also. All of their transgressions, all of their movements, all of the deviations away from what we thought was normal, that impossibility of moving from Peitas Amud Beis to the Ois Tzadi, that's not simply because we're human, that's because you created us that way, Rabbeinu Shalom. And that, as we know from Rav Tzadok and the Tzaddikim of Ishbitz, is the Ikar Tshuva. Ikar Tshuva is to come to recognize that Rabbeinu Shalom, you're everything. You're everything. In Avada, every halacha of tshuva applies. B'diktuk hadiktuk. Every aspect of tshuva and aliyah, perpetual aliyah applies. But at the core of it all, ki'ilu, I have bechira in any of this. Ki'ilu, I have any say in anything that goes on in this world. Rabbeinu Shalom, you're everything. There is no world. There is no world. I'm not real in the sense that I assume myself to be real. Avada, with all of the prerequisite, clarifications. I saw a video. I saw a video going around where somebody was talking about Tzimtzum and this possibility or impossibility of singing a song, Hashem is here, Hashem is there. And I didn't listen to it, but I mean, I don't know the person, but the sugya is so delicate and so adin and so beautiful, and there's no machlokas whatsoever. And if there is any machlokas, it's what the Lubavitcher Rebbe defines as the machlokas, which is not a machlokas either. And to approach a topic like this with such a, an off-the-cuff nature it's inappropriate to the subject matter. That's all. That it's forgetting about the wrong svaros in it. It's inappropriate to the subject matter. But sof davar. Meaning, even if we say that Tzimtzum is real, in the end of the day, Tzimtzum's not real, right? In the end of the day, so Yitzchak is saying, are you kidding me, Rabbanu Shleilim? At this point, when it comes time for the future, now it's us alone without you. Hilu, we had any second in this world without you. Banai v'lo banecha. B'shah shehikdimu lefanecha nasa lenishma kara lehem b'ni b'chayri. At the moment when they were makdim nasa lenishma, at that moment you were magdir them as b'ni b'chayri. Meaning Yitzchak is not saying, it's not being misyaches to a past event and saying, but don't you remember what you said once back then? Because we know, the Gemara says, Mufurish, Klal Yisrael come. Klal Yisrael come to Kadosh Baruch Hu and they say, Rebbeinu Shleilim, we're terrified you're not going to forget the Egel. We're terrified you're never going to forget the Egel. And Hashem's like, you're scared of that? I'm going to forget it. That's forgotten. It didn't even happen. What are you even talking about? And then Bnei Yisrael, in the most Jewish way possible, they're like, no, you forget things? Maybe you're going to forget Har Sinai. And Hashem says, no, I'm never going to forget Har Sinai. How can I possibly forget Har Sinai? Zak the Maral and Tiferes Yisrael, because one is be'etzem and one is be'mikra. The etzem of the Yid is b'shah she'ekdimu nasa l'nishma. That's the essence, that's the hagdara of a Jewish person. That's the Raz, mi gila Raz zu labanai, who revealed this secret. The secret of being a Yid is nasa v'nishma. Is experiencing this worldliness down here first and foremost, and only then going to try and understand what it means to live in the world of Atzilus, in a world of clarification. The Ikar is to find you down here, Rabbanu Shleilim, Nasa v'nishba. And Hashem, when you saw them say Nasa v'nishma, at that moment it was a kvias that they're B'ni B'chayri. And B'ni B'chayri means that Rabbanu Shleilim, you love them more than you love yourself. That the most essential thing in creation is Nishmas Yisrael. And you allow for the room to see Nishmas Yisrael as on a certain level even being more significant than your kavod, Rabbanu Shleilim. This is the cloud what we saw by Yonah ben Amittai. Yonah ben Amittai heard very clearly what he needed to tell Klal Yisrael. He needed to punish them. They were going to get punished. And Yonah ben Amittai, he wanted to go, had Yonah gone to Nineveh, Chazal say, and moved them forward in tshuva, then it would have been a taina on Klal Yisrael who were not chozer b'tshuva. And so Yonah ben Amittai knew this, and Yonah ben Amittai said, I'm not going to embarrass the Jews here. And how he was ready to be Moshe Nefesh for this, throw me overboard. I don't care, I'm not going to embarrass the Jews. He learned this from Aaron HaKohen. He said, I'm not going to embarrass the Jews, throw me into the fire, I'm going to make an egel, I'm not going to embarrass you guys. And so Yonah ben Amittai, Chazal say, he was toveya, the kavod of the ben, and not the kavod of the av. That he demanded the respect of the child and not the respect of the father. Which is what the tzaddikim do. That they demand kavod Yisrael, of Nishmas Yisrael, over and above the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes. And Rashbi praises this as the essential trait of tzaddikim. He uses a lashon that when I'm forgetting exactly which king, I think it was Yeravam, when Yeravam, prior to his kind of really going off, when he defiled things, Hashem was patient. When he defiled holiness, Hashem was patient. But when he was Hosiv Zaro Lingoa Benavi, but when he put his hand out to touch the Navi, Hashem said, no, you're not going to touch my children. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Tovei him. We see this, the Ziduchavit Tzaddikim point this out by Birchas Koyanim. We say, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka. That Kavyachal, it's like the father who puts the child on their shoulders and looks up to their child, Ke'ilu, that the child is the crown upon them. Now everybody knows the father is bigger than the child. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kavod is bigger than kavod Yisrael. But in the end of the day, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is writes in this world, without any reason that we can ever possibly understand, is that it should look as if kavod of Yisrael, of Nishmas Yisrael, is more valuable in his eyes than the kavod of the Rebbeinu Shleilim, than the din and the cheshbon. Rav Itchemeyer is bringing down recently from Yosefus, actually, that there's a mashal that the king is really in charge. But when the queen tells the king what to do, then it doesn't appear that the king is in charge. And when it appears that the queen's in charge. But when the children ask something from the queen, it no longer appears that the queen's in charge. It's clear now that the children are in charge. But everybody knows it's the king's decision to allow the children to be in charge. So that's the secret of Nishmas Yisrael, Yisrael Asher B'cha Espire. That Nishmas Yisrael is so significant that this is what it means when HaKadosh Baruch Hu refers to us as B'nai B'chayri. So Yitzchak Avinu is saying, Hashem, you already were magdir this. You already made it abundantly clear that Nishmas Yisrael is the most significant thing imaginable. Achshav banai v'lo banecha, but now in this moment, right here, right now, they're mine and not yours. And furthermore, the va'od, meaning over here Yitzchak is saying, and even if you don't want to accept that svara, right? Even if you want to say that there's a real din and cheshbon that has to take place, it's a real havamina. There's a real, okay, Hashem is saying, I get your svara, I get it, and not yet. Okay, lasid level, there's dargas of lasid level. There's Yomasa Mashiach, Olam Haba. Right here, right now, we still have to be metapel with the chovos. Right, that's the svara. And Yitzchak is saying, so Hashem, if you want to tell me it's not time to be Megala Yichud Ilah in that way, to reveal that in truth everything is part and parcel of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then I'll give you another reason. Even in the world of chovos, even in the world of Schar Ba'inish. Kama chatu. How much have they actually transgressed? What's their deep deficiency? How deep does it go? They're so bad. The Jewish people are so bad that we have to be so worried about their judgment. Kama shnaisav shel adam. How many years does a person live? And again, shana is melashon shinoi, it's the changes. How many years does a person live in this world that is a world of changes and ups and downs and transgressions and transversals and transvaluations and ups and downs? How long? Is it a shivim shana, maybe 70 years? Dal esrim delay anish aleh. If we're going to be technical, Rebbeinu Shlalem, I'm going to be a lawyer now. Right? So, okay, if we're being technical, 70-year life, you take away the first 20 years because a person is not considered chayiv for the first 20 years of their lives. Pashu lahem chamishin. So what you have now is 50 years. So we split it in half. Right? So the cheshbon of their chovos is now split in half. Dal chafhei delay lusa. Take away 25 of the night. Either where they're sleeping or in line with what we're saying, there's olam hazeh and its difficulty, and there's the lilusa. There's the nighttime of Olam Hazeh. There's the real oinus of Olam Hazeh. The things in our lives, those dark blots in our ability to move our Nekudas HaBechira, that they're brokenness, but they're not going to be judged on us. It's certain inbred traits, certain ways of being raised, experiences that a person goes through. There's a cloud, meaning we're going to hold them responsible for the day where things are clarified, where they even have a semblance of Bechira. But the lilusa, which is from a language of yalala, crying out, which comes from the forces of nocturnality in our lives where things are scary and frightening. So Yitzchak, it's very clear at that point. And Yitzchak is able to say this. He's able to say, Hashem, you can't judge them for Laila because Yitzchak is Laila. Yitzchak is Laila, the Zohar Kadosh says. Laila da Yitzchak. If Avram is the boiker, the Laila, the incoming of night, the transition between the clarity of day and the descent of darkness is Yitzchak Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is much later on, which is shaykh to bringing us into the world of David Melech Mashiach, which is Chatzos, which is where nighttime becomes day again. But Yitzchak, who understood the darkness of nighttime, understands the Yalala that comes from there, he's going to say, so we have 50 years, because we've taken off 20 from the 70, now we're going to take off 25 for the nighttime. Pashuluhu chafu. So they have 25 years left. So that's already not such a cheshbon that we have to make. Dal tarte sari upalga, the tzala yumeichal de beisakise. Take away, I believe it's tarte, I believe it's 12.5. 12 and a half. Dal tarte sari uplaga. Take away 12 and a half hours for the time that they're eating and that they're in the restroom, meaning the physicality of the self, the body. Can't hold them accountable for being in a body. They didn't ask to be put in a body. The body has its necessities. We know that this is true by even the biggest tzaddikim in the world, that the body has its limitations, the body keeps score, and the body has its necessities. So we're minimizing the chiyuv over here, right? So it's 70, then we take away 20, then we take away 20, which leaves 50, then we split it, which is 25, then we take away 12.5, which is, I'm not a math person, but I believe that's probably close to the number we're trying to get to. Yeah?
It also says that the 12 and a half is containing also the tzluye.
Of davening?
It's
Chayesha, right? Chayesha. Yeah. Right, so the tzlulei, I mean, we can say that, right, tefillah is considered chaye sha'ah versus Torah, which is considered chaye olam, right? Because Torah is something that's shaykh to the ruchnius of a person, it's shaykh to the gradations of growth, while davening is, we know, rooted in the guf. Davening is rooted in the chisaron. Right, that's what the tzaddikim of Ishbitz and Radzin and what the Maharal points out in his Nesif HaTfilah based on the Ikrim, that the entire concept of tefillah is rooted simply on the fact that the alul needs to recognize that it's an alul, that something that is dependent on something needs to come to recognize that it's dependent. The entire experience of tefillah is rooted in human frailty, in the body, not frailty, but the body. Without the body, without being stuck in the confines of this worldliness, so a person wouldn't have any reason to daven. Which is why we saw, or I shared this Torah, the Beis Yaakov of the Ishbitz says that why is a shikar asur lehispalel? Why is an intoxicated individual not allowed to pray? And again, intoxication means whatever it means for the individual, behaviorally, psychologically, experientially. We all have our own forms of intoxication. And the reason that a person who's intoxicated can't pray is because intoxication is the opposite of prayer. Why is intoxication the opposite of prayer? Intoxication is the opposite because the Chazal tell us that intoxication is a state where it appears that the entire world is smooth and straight and there's no problems, there's no minios, there's no bumps or folds. And that is the opposite of prayer because prayer is born out of the recognition of the chisaron. The tzaddikim of Ishbitz say that mi basari echaze eloikim, that basar is Rosh Tevos, busha, rima, busha, I forget exactly, shiflus and rima, meaning it's the three identifiable places where a human being feels lowest in their lives. And that's where tefillah comes from. So we can say that tefillah, eating, going to the restroom on a certain level is very, very much connected. Right, even Beis HaKisei, Beis HaKnesses is a certain connection of language. I always thought, I used to joke with my older brother about this. Not a joke, I think it's a real Torah. That there's a reason, especially if you get introduced to learning Torah later on in life, by way of, like a post-high school scenario, you start learning, Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph. And the things that you really, really are forced to come in. So you start off with Shavisi Hashem Gevalt, right? Shavisi Hashem the Negi Tamid, Tikkun Chatzos, Beis HaMikdash, Toiv Ma'at Bekavana, Meharbe Below Kavana, and then very suddenly you're thrown into a world filled with excrement. You're thrown into the Hilchos Beis HaKisei, and the entire concept is how do you make a bracha in a world filled with excrement? How do you daven in a world that has excess in it, in a world that necessitates the concept of Yitzia, of something being taken out, which is always already post-chet of Eitz Hadas Tevera, not being human, right? Being human was always there, but we had the Nachash to take care of the Zevel for us. There would have been no Hilchos Beis HaKisei had there been no Chet of the Eitz Hadas Tevera. But in a post-Chet world, so we live in a world of a Beis HaKisei very often which stands recognition face-to-face with the Beis Knesses. Rav Kook has a very strong lashon in Chadarav that he writes when he was younger. He says that, I can't help it, I'm a very open person, but I can't help but get the feeling that when I pass the houses of worship of certain religions, that I feel as if I'm walking through mamish sarchon shel Beis HaKisei. I'm walking through the disgusting filth of a bathroom. And Rav Kook was not, thinking about the worst insult he could give, right? Rav Kook was saying something very direct and very specific, that there's something about, Beis HaKisei and Beis HaKnesses that are both born out of the same experience of being human in this world. Yeah. What, with Malach, where we're domet to Malachim? No.
Call a marriage wedding, and you would have told one.
Right.
There's three things, marriage that happens to be davening and eating and basically.
Mamish? Elongating, and it lengthens the years. Which theoretically would be a breakup to Yitzchak Avinu's Mahalach here. Right, Yitzchak is saying, let's minimize the years. He's looking to minimize the years, but these three things is extending the years, which will make it a harder thing.
Even according to that Gemara, it's extended
in those areas. Avada.
So it's still not adding to the cheshbon.
It's right because because Yitzchak is saying that cheshbon is not part of the cheshbon because that's chayeshah. That's being right. Very good, amazing. Let's go weiter. So Yitzchak makes this whole cheshbon. And one of the things that we have to see about this cheshbon of Yitzchak Look, Yitzchak represents dinim, Yitzchak represents gevuros, Yitzchak represents severity and concealment and simsum and all the things we spoke about. There's so much to discuss about Yitzchak Avinu, but one of the things is that Yitzchak Avinu represents severity, gevura, but gevura enables something referred to as hamtakas hadinim b'sharasham, sweetening judgments and severity in its root, which is not just getting rid of severity as if it was batla ka'afra da'ara, as if it never existed, but rather being machzir them, taking them with you, bringing them back up to the Rabbanu Shalom and saying, you thought that you can send me down here with these issues and it would take me away from you. I'm here coming back to you with these very issues and saying, not only did they not take me away from you, but they're the very things that brought me closer to you. And that's Hamtakas Hadinim B'Shtarashim, bringing them back up to their essential place. One of the Mahalchim, there's a number of Mahalchim, each one deserves a book of its own, of being Mamtik Dinim. But one of them is actually brought down in the Leshem Shuvah Achloima, based on the Gra, based on an Arizal. And we see Gevura manifested in two ways, in Maror and in Ketairas. There's sugyas b'fnei atzmam. Ketairas represents excess. It's 11 and not 10, which always represents a deviation from holiness. It's what the machshefim utilized all the time. It's the secret that Moshe Rabbeinu had to steal from the Malach HaMaves. Ketairas is matzlan limaves because it comes from a place of maves. It's the chush hareach, which can fix and destroy as well. And maror is avada, right? Maror is gematria misa. The Arizal says that's the shpitz gevura. And so the halacha says that Haboile maror lo yotza. Someone who swallows their maror is not yotza. Why? Because a person has to chew it. Zok the Arizal, why am I chewing my maror? Why am I breaking up and grinding down ketairas? Dak min hadak. Because when I look at gevuros very often, they seem to coalesce into themselves. This is already taking it to a psychological register, but when I'm looking at issues in my life, the tendency of my issues, especially if they're nameless, is to coalesce together to create what appears to be an issue that is far too large and far too manageable to handle, right? Very much like the Meraglim. They saw Anakim, and instead of realizing that, no, it's really like 4 or 5 people standing on each other's shoulders, they saw it as one person, and if it's one big problem, I can't deal with that. So one of the ways of being mamtik dinim is breaking down the problem into bite-sized manageable pieces, of chewing the maror down, of breaking down the ketairas. There's a medrash that's brought down in the Sefer Kol HaTur. Whether it's a real medrash or not doesn't make much of a difference. But there was a king who needed to punish his son. He did something that he was chayav misa for. And the chayav of misa was a chayav of skila, that he was going to have to stone him to death. So he says to his wise man, he says, on the one hand, I can't negate the necessity to punish my son. That will negate the value of law. On the other hand, I can't kill my son, right? I love my son. So the Baal Eitzah said as follows, okay, we have to throw this stone at him, but no one said it has to be done at once. And so let's break the stone into a million little pieces and throw each and every pebble at the person. And so you'll be makayim the stoning of your son by throwing that rock, and at the same point you won't be hurting him. By breaking down the problem, by minimizing it, by having it and having it and having it and cutting it down, that's the way that we're mamtik dinim. That's the chewing of the maror. And that's exactly what Yitzchak is doing in this Gemara. He's taking a large item and he's breaking it down slowly but surely, minimizing it so that it could become bite-sized manageable tasks that I need to deal with instead of being overwhelmed by this coalescence of all the issues in my life. The name Yitzchak itself represents this, because Kuf, we said earlier that Kuf could represent Keser, it could represent the Kuf Brachos, but Kuf is also a lashon of Klala. The Zohar HaKadosh tells us that Kuf came in front of the Rabbanu Shalom to be the first letter in the Torah HaKadosha, and Hashem says, no, you're a good letter, right, but you're a Klala. And you look at the Ari by Kavanas of Purim, you see the Kuf is the regel of the Kof that goes down below the lines, and it goes too far in its imitation, like Haman, Harasha. So Kuf can also represent the heaviness of Gevuros. Yitzchak's name is Chatzi Kuf. It's breaking Kuf down into its half. How are we going to be mamtik the klala? By breaking it down into the half. And it just so happens that what you find is 50 and 50, which is the Nun Shari Bina, right, which Yitzchak Avinu is being mamtik because he comes from that place. So what Yitzchak Avinu is engaged in over here is mamish, the same avoda that we have to be metapel with, minimizing the gevuros, making the problems a little bit more manageable. There was a PDF of, I believe, what was the Baal Shem Tov Siddur, right? Was that real in the end? So it was an amazing thing. They uncovered what they felt was the Baal Shem Tov Siddur with Kavanos, and they made an amazing PDF of it. And I didn't see this inside. It's very hard to read, but Rav Itchemeyer Shlita brought down around Pesach that what you have in the Baal Shem Tov Siddur was Haseba by Maror. Haseba by Maror, which is crazy, right? Haseba by Maror. And Rav Yitzchak spends a lot of time saying that this is only by the true tzaddikim and only by the tzaddikim amitim and the Yechidei Hadoros, who the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, and the Chana Ariel, Rav Yitzchak Isaac of Hummel said, is that by certain tzaddikim, by Rashbi, they're mufka on a certain level from the halachos of the Churban. That they're removed from the concept of Churban. So by a tzaddik who's mufka from Churban, so by Haseba, by Maror, you could also do Haseba. Because you realize on a certain level that chewing it up, dak min hadak, is part and parcel of the fixing, feeling it. So Yitzchak Avinu, he's not saying Rabbeinu Shloim ignore. He's saying that minimize, and also giving us eitzah, minimize. Not ignore, not repress, not suppress, but identify the order in which things need to be dealt with, break them into bite-sized manageable tasks, and go one by one down the number line instead of being paralyzed and being in a state of procrastination in the face of something that appears to be much larger. And at that point, Yitzchak Avinu continues, Pashuluhu tarte saryupaga, and so you take away 12 and a half. Im ata soivel es kulam mutav. If you accept all of this upon yourself, Rabbeinu Shloim, if you're willing to carry the 25 minus 12.5, then great. And if not, palga alai u palga alech. I'll take half and you take half, right? Like exactly what we said, chatzi, palg, peleg Hashem malei mayim. Peleg is the Roshei Tevos of Purim and Lag BaOmer. The Mechaber tells us that what? That we know from the Siman, peleg chai, is that Purim and Lag BaOmer always fall out on the same day, because those 2 days are associated with Yitzchak Avinu, those 2 days are associated with Gevura, those 2 days are associated with difficulty and transforming difficulty into light. Purim is obvious. Lag BaOmer, the entire Inyan, is Giloi and revelation that comes out of difficulty. When Rashbi comes out of the cave, right, and Pinchas ben Yair, either his son-in-law or his father-in-law, is saying, Oy li shari'isi bikach, woe to me that I've seen you as such, broken apart, split in half, with openings. And Rashbi says, Oy l'cha shari'isi bikach, ashrecha shari'isi bikach, kim lo re'isi bikach, lo ha'isi bikach. Woe to you that you've seen me as such, praiseworthy are you that you've seen me as such, because if you didn't see me as such, I wouldn't have been as such. Meaning without the cave, there's no light. Without the choshech that precedes the giloi, there's no or, and that's palga alayu, palga alech, right? Purim and Lag BaOmer mitzad ha'elyonim, and Purim and Lag BaOmer mitzad ha'tachtonim. V'im timsi loimar, and if you want to say kulam alai, right? Yitzchak has all his bases covered. He's not taking no for an answer here. If you want to say it's all on me, and this is Yitzchak who doesn't speak very much in the Torah. If you want to say it's all on me, hakrivas nafshi kaimich. I killed myself for you. I died for you, Rabbeinu Shloim. I gave myself over for you completely. Let my Mesiras Nefesh be enough to save them. And that's the Mesiras Nefesh necessary for being Megala Kedushas Yisrael. Because we know there's painful Torahs about the Aggadah. From the Piyasetz Rebbe Hashem Yom Domo, that by Yitzchak Avinu we find that there is a machshava of Mesiras Nefesh without a Maisa of Mesiras Nefesh. And by the Shoah, which is representative of everything and separate and apart from everything, what you have is the opposite. You have a Maisa of Mesiras Nefesh without the Kavana of Mesiras Nefesh. Zok the Piyasetz Rebbe, it's the machshava of Mesiras Nefesh that Yitzchak Avinu had at the Aggadah, which is makasher itself throughout every aspect of Jewish history to the Maisa of Mesiras Nefesh that's devoid of a machshava. So Yitzchak is saying, we've done enough. We've gone through enough for you, Rabbeinu Shloim. Hakrivas nafshi kaimech. I brought myself closer to you. I gave myself over to you. Pasku v'yomru, and at that point, Klal Yisrael are going to say, Ata Avinu. Ata Avinu, you are our Father. Now, Chazal tell us something interesting. I mean, the fact that Yitzchak is, and there's so much to talk about, but the fact that Yitzchak is called Yitzchak is not funny at all. Yitzchak, like we saw, represents Gevura, severity, but at the same point, Yitzchak is Nikra al Shem Schok. Zak de Chedush Harim, whose name was Yitzchak Meir as well, which is the idea that the light of Yitzchak is what's going to be Meir La'asad Lavo, in the sense that it's specifically the light of Yitzchak and Gevura, and the lower experiences of life get transformed into the higher elements. That the Chedush Harim says as follows: what do you mean what's funny about Yitzchak? He went up to the Aggadah and he was killed, he was dead, but he walked down alive at the very same moment. He's dead and alive at the very same moment. There's nothing funnier than that. Which is why the Tikkun Zohar say that Yitzchak is Osios Keitz Chai. Kates, which means an end, Chai, which means in life, an end within life and a life within an end. So it's specifically Yitzchak Avinu who has the ability to bring out this aura of La'asad Lavo, because Yitzchak Avinu gave himself. He knows what it means to die for the Rabbanu Shalom. And as the Brisker Rav said, that the reason it's called Akedas Yitzchak, this is an amazing Torah. I saw this in Asifas HaGrach, I believe. But the reason that it's called Akedas Yitzchak and not Akedas Avraham is because really it should have been considered the test of Avraham. But in truth, it becomes the test of Yitzchak because Yitzchak had to continue living for a long time after it. And it's much harder to live al pi Kiddush Hashem than it is to die al Kiddush Hashem. And Yitzchak Avinu is being Megala, that inyan, that we live and we die for you at the very same moment. And Chazal tell us, so this is why Yitzchak Avinu goes away a little bit after the Aggadah. Right? He goes away a little bit. And where does he go? The Targum says, and the Zohar Kadosh implies that he goes into Gan Eden. And when does he come out of Gan Eden? When does Yitzchak Avinu come out? He comes out when Rivka is being brought to him. And that's why V'tipol Rivka me'al Gamal. Why did Rivka fall out? Because there was something really funny about how Yitzchak walked out of Gan Eden. The Bali Tosfos on the Chumash say this, the Zohar Kadosh says this. How did Yitzchak come out of Gan Eden? He came out doing a handstand. He came out with his hands on the ground and his feet in the air, being Megala, this Inyan of V'nahapechu. My head is below, my feet are above, I've got no idea what's going on, nobody knows what's up and down. And that's what Yitzchak Avinu is bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu to task for, to reveal that it's specifically in these topsy-turvy places that we're going to find the deepest light. And just to finish up with the Gemara, I mean, there's so much that can be said about this. Paschal v'yomru ata avinu, ata is a lashon of, meaning seeing something face to face, so clear that I don't have language to describe it, which is why Yitzchak Avinu was so silent. Amalam Yitzchak says, Ad sha'atem mekalsen li, whoa, instead of praising me, kalsu la Kadosh Baruch Hu. Praise Hashem. Because Yitzchak understood exactly what Avram and Yaakov were saying the whole time. This is not about us, this is all about Hashem. But the secret of the Jewish person being on the level, or almost on the level, or Hashem even allowing us to conceive of ourselves as being almost on the level as the Kedusha of the Rabbanu Shalom, even though there will always be an infinite gap, that also comes from the Rabbanu Shalom. Yitzchak understood, he's saying, I'm not saying that the Yiddish neshama is higher than the Rabbanu Shalom, God forbid, and that their kavod is higher. Yitzchak knows the joke. Yitzchak is the joke. That Hashem is the one who decides that the Jewish neshama should be seen in such a way. So Yitzchak is saying, this is not about me, this is not about us, it's about bittul, it's about praising to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, U'machui Lahu Yitzchak HaKadosh Baruch Hu Beinayu. And what it means really, al pshat, is that Yitzchak points into the eyes of Bnei Yisrael to look at Hashem. But there's also a mashma'us that Yitzchak points to the eyes of Hashem, so to speak, because Yitzchak Avinu is also the one who is considered blind, who's blinded by Esav. So that could be another discussion at a future point, because Yitzchak lives in a world of choshech that is so... It's a world of illumination that is so illuminated that can only be appear to the person as a darkness, like the Zohar Kadosh says about the Keser, the Darg of Keser, which is that it's ukamhu klapi ilas ha'ilos, that it's black or it's darkened in relationship to that which is higher than it because it's so lofty. And the Gemara ends, miyad nasu einayim lamarom, immediately they raised their eyes above. And at that point, through the koyach of Yitzchak, Bnei Yisrael understand that Rabbeinu Shalom, it's always been you, even in the Yitzchak moments of our lives, even in that arrested development of being stuck on Peitesam and Beis and not making it to Ois Tzadi. And Be'ezras Hashem, it'll be a good hamshacha because the entire inyan of Lamdas in general is Mukusher to Yitzchak Avinu. Because Lamdas, as we're going to see, comes from a perspective of Bina, of separation. Bekiyas comes from a perspective of Chachma, of general qualities. But we're going to see, to descend into Svara, everything about Svara is breaking things apart into bite-sized, manageable pieces, right? It's Chefsa and Gavra, breaking a singular concept into two categories, and Hapshata and Od Hapshata and Od Hapshata, Be'ezras Hashem.
Why is that Bina and Adas?
Why is it Bina and Adas? Because Bina...
That's Havdalah.
Havdalah is das, but that's only dealing with the world of separation. Meaning Havdalah is only necessary once separation is present. Bina is the emergence of separation. Bina is Havchana. Hamavchin Hanaisin Lasechvi Bina Lahavchin Ben Yom Levein Laila. Havchana precedes Havdalah. Havchana is perceiving a difference in something even when it appears to be the same thing. Havdalah is making a clear separation between two things that are already separate.